Hello. Hello, welcome to Taxpayer Alert. I'm Al Segala. I'll be your moderator. I'm also president of the Calaveras County Taxpayer Association, and we do everything we can to try to get information, reliable information to the public and to the taxpayer. And this show is no exception. We're so lucky to have our planning director, Peter Maurer. Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Okay. This has been a busy week for you, and we have several things to cover. The first one, I guess, is a general plan. It's been said that the general plan is getting close to completion.
Well, that's right. It's actually been very busy several past few months. We went through, I don't know, half a dozen hearings with the Planning Commission from May through June. Then went to the Board of Supervisors, had 2 hearings with the board. The end of July, the board sort of granted their conceptual approval of the general plan with direction to bring back the findings. Findings is a very important document. It basically outlines the basis for the decision that the board has made with regard to the environmental impact report, the policies, the mitigation measures, why some were accepted, why some were rejected. So I've been working with our outside counsel on that to prepare that document. It's almost ready to go. The board has set a, what's the word I'm looking for, a hearing date, not firmly set in concrete, but I'm drawing a blank on the word. It's been, like I said, been a busy week. But on November 12th, we're expected to bring those back for final action. That would be the date that the new general plan will become effective.
When we have an existing plan, and we've been operating under that, when was that our existing general plan last changed?
Well, it's been changed a number of times over the years. It was originally adopted in 1996.
Okay.
So it's been, 23 years now, if I do my math right. And, we do occasional amendments to it. The most recent amendment was actually adoption of a new housing element.
Okay.
That was done just about a month ago in September.
Okay.
And so, and I'm pleased to announce that the state of California has certified that. I received a letter yesterday saying it meets all the state requirements. That's a major hurdle to get through. So it's periodically updated, but as far as a comprehensive revision to the general plan, that was last done in 1996.
How does the new housing element affect our community in terms of our economy and whether people would come here to build things?
Mm-hmm. The housing element is an interesting construct of state law. It's one of the few general plan elements that has to be approved by the state. It's the longest set of regulations related to general plan in state law. I don't know how many pages it is, but it's, there's all kinds of rules and regulations. As everyone knows, California is facing a housing crisis.
Right.
Cost of construction is high. Other communities are facing issues associated with just the lack of housing altogether. Commuters, from the Central Valley driving into the Bay Area to, just to be able to meet affordable housing needs. Traditionally, it's thought that if you pay more than 30% of your income towards housing, you're overpaying for housing. We don't have the same issues that, say, Bay Area communities are facing, where there's just they're priced out of the market to such a degree. The real issue we have is just the lack of housing around. There's been very little construction over the last 10 years or so, since the housing downturn. We were actually losing population for a long time. The big issue is simply the cost of construction based on, compared to the sales price of a house. It costs more to build the house than someone could sell it in the market here. And so there's just not much construction going on. Another issue came up in the paper the other day was about the conversion of housing, workforce housing into vacation rentals.
Right.
So it's really important that there is sufficient housing to supply the workforce, whether it be teachers or firefighters or people working in industries or shopkeepers, whatever it might be. That if there's no housing available, it's going to be very difficult to attract workers and therefore hard to attract new businesses to the community.
It seems like the least expensive housing that one could have, even if it's temporary, would be mobile home parks and trailer parks. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm sure it does, and I know that you're right that it's probably.
I mean, how the market would respond.
that a mobile home is less expensive housing type than a stick-built home. I think that you get a lot of pushback from communities, with mobile home parks. Some valid, some not. There's a belief that maybe it's not a attractive use in the community. Some communities have restricted them. State law requires that if you can build a stick-built home, wood frame home on your property, you can put a modular unit or a mobile home on your property.
Right.
And so as far as being allowed to use a mobile home, there's no restriction in the county for that. Building mobile home parks, you're looking at the same kinds of issues as far as traffic generation in schools and impacts on fire departments and water supply. We have a proposal going on right now in Valley Springs. They don't have the sewer capacity, or we're not sure if they have the sewer capacity to serve it. So those are some of the issues we have to look at, regardless of the type of housing that's there.
It seemed like, there is a subdivision that's really a mobile home park, but it's not. People are not required to put a mobile or a trailer on the property. They can build it stick-built, and some do. This is in Copperopolis, in the part of the Copper Cove subdivision. I think it's called Unit 1A. 1A? I forget, maybe. I'm old now. I can't remember everything. Well, anyway, so people can buy these lots and put a trailer or a mobile home on the property, and then they can rent it out, and they do. And about half the homes in this subdivision of several hundred homes are rentals, and they're reasonably priced, probably the most reasonably priced in the county. And I'm thinking, well, if the free market's working, why aren't there more of these type of inexpensive subdivisions created?
I think it goes back to your statement of the free market is people choose what they want to live in, and not everyone wants to live in a mobile home.
Oh, no.
And I think that...
But to start and end, all these people are retired people.
Oh, yeah.
That's the end, starting out, and then where you end, you want to, some people haven't achieved very much in their lifetime, and they need, seniors do need, many of them do need inexpensive homes.
Well, I think it gets back to what I was saying before about the cost of construction. Now, the cost of a mobile home is less than an on-site built home, but still you've got all the infrastructure costs, the land costs, the water, sewer, roads, the electrical infrastructure. It all costs to the point where a landowner who's developing land says, well, can I make more money by building high-end homes to those who can afford it, as opposed to buying more moderately priced homes? And the market seems to be pushing builders to higher-end homes. And so there's various programs that we're looking at, particularly within the housing element, that are trying to encourage. We don't want to force it, but encourage. Provide incentives for builders to provide moderately priced housing. And so we'll see if some of these programs that we just recently adopted, we can implement them and actually see if they work or not. And if they don't, then we'll try something else.
Yeah, I think that that was proposed in Tuolumne County, if I remember right, a while back. I think it's called inclusionary zoning.
Well, that's different. That's where actually you mandate that
A certain percentage.
A certain percentage of a subdivision or an apartment complex or a housing project actually provide for lower cost or moderately priced, housing, and it's basically subsidized through either the builders or which ends up getting passed on to the buyers of the other market rate homes.
Yeah.
That's not something that we're doing here.
Yeah, that's wonderful news. I don't agree with the inclusionary zoning because the bottom line will hurt people. Okay, there's some other characteristics with the housing element. Apparently, it's pretty complicated. I don't understand it. And what's concerning to me is will the housing element encourage or discourage building in our county?
But its intent is to encourage building.
I that's the intention.
Yeah.
But what will the effect actually be?
Well, I think it's one thing why we do an annual review. How's it working? What are the stats? Are we building more housing or are we not? And we should be looking at policies, not just in the housing element, but in the entire general plan. Are we going in the direction that we want to go? Are we providing more jobs? Are we creating more industry? Providing a range of housing types? And if not, why?
Yeah.
What are there policies we have in place that restrict that? And if so, what can we do to rectify that?
That makes sense, and that's very logical. It seemed like that there should be an industry feedback as to what regulations just don't make sense, and be willing to blurt it out. And if there could be this type of feedback, then there's light at the end of the tunnel. That means that there could be recommendations made maybe to the state to modify these regulations, or to allow the local government to have final say. In other words, if you found something in Sequa that was hurting the people in Calaveras County, you could say, okay, we're not going to adapt that. And for this reason, And if enough counties did that, then the legislature would probably revise, not do any more harm.
Well, you would think, but we are a political subdivision of the state, and the state rules can supersede ours. I've actually been involved for the past couple of years in a housing committee of other planning directors throughout the state, working with the legislature, working with CSAC, the California State Association of Counties, which is sort of a lobbying arm of counties, and the League of California Cities, to review legislation. And the legislature is constantly coming up with new ideas of how to solve the problems, and often we look at those and that's just going to cause more problems. So I'll review the draft legislation, we'll meet with other directors and lobbyists and American Planning Association representatives and try to work with the legislature to say, well, have you thought about this? Do we realize the ramifications of what happens if you do this? And we've been able to change to some degree, but elected officials have their own agenda typically, and particularly at the state level. They're moving forward to address concerns as they see it. There's been a number of proposals that we've been able to push back on that haven't been adopted, but there have been some things that have been adopted that are going to create some additional challenges for cities and counties.
Yeah. Well, that's good news if it's effective. The main thing is to have an environment where contractors or owners or investors would love to come here and create something because there's a need. And when you have a barrier that prevents the market from satisfying the need, it's lose-lose all the way around. And okay, so anything else with the general plan? Now, the housing element is the most important part of it probably right now.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that. I mean, it's an important part, and we are looking at implementation. The board just approved my ability to apply for a non-competitive grant. At least there's some carrot along with the sticks that the state's been providing. There's money available to implement some of these programs. So the next few weeks I'll be working with the state to apply for money to look at some of these programs that we identified in our housing element to say, okay, if reducing the building code standards for certain types of housing is feasible, what we do. Work with community members to identify where some of the constraints are. We were talking earlier about the building department, and they have the new building official has expanded this committee that's actually been around for quite some time and tried to work with the building community to look at some of those barriers. And so we'll work closely with them. The planning and building are very closely related in our review of projects and working hand in hand together. So we'll be looking at some of these ideas. And that's one of the things that we'll be working on with this grant application, is to come up with the money to maybe revise some of our standards within the constraints that we're allowed to.
Right. I talked to Doug, the new building official, and he's very positive about the committee, new old committee or whatever, and about its abilities to identify ways to streamline what we're doing. He also said that in rural counties, the people can have a waiver of most of the requirements of the building code, not all of them, but most of them, under the theory that they're not affecting their neighbors and they're not affecting the public. But you can't do that with a rental. Huh? You can't rent a home. If you're going to rent the home out, it needs to be strictly in accordance with the building code.
Yeah, there's, and I'll probably mischaracterize the term, but it's something like rural owner-built small housing or something along those lines.
Yeah, that's what he said.
The state law allows, within some constraints, to modify, I wouldn't say just waive all the requirements, but modify the requirements to reduce costs. And that's one of the things we're looking at with this new program. So that was one of the things on our housing element implementation program. The board felt that was a top priority, and we're moving forward with that over the next couple of months.
Now, the other one could be, although it doesn't affect the building department, would be the ability for the market to create mobile home parks and trailer parks. The least expensive housing there is a trailer, and so this seems to be a fact. And if there could be a release on restraints against mobile home parks, I know the community doesn't like the idea of mobile home parks, but sometimes maybe some areas would be appropriate, and maybe some modifications could be done in trees or something to make it more pleasant. But the bottom line is, people need to have a place to live if they're going to stay in the state.
Well, certainly a mobile home park is one component of the housing mix that we'd like to see in the county. We do have several of them. We've got one in process right now. We have to look at some of the same infrastructure issues that we would with a subdivision.
Right.
There's water, sewer, fire access, road impacts. All the same things need to be looked at. But we do allow mobile home parks to be
There's
proposed.
no ban
on it.
No ban on park. That's a good thing.
Yeah, but it's sort of a market issue. Is does the landowner want to build a mobile home park? And we haven't seen a lot of that. But then we haven't seen a lot of subdivision activity in the county either in the recent years.
Does it have to have special zoning for that?
We do have a mobile home park overlay zone, which is an area we identify these areas are appropriate for these, but it doesn't, someone could propose a mobile home park in any of our residential zones.
Okay. Are we aware of areas that would be suitable for mobile home parks now?
Well, the general plan has identified areas of higher density residential development, and so anywhere where we have a medium density or a high density or even low density residential. It depends on the infrastructure. If you're proposing to put a mobile home park on a septic system, you obviously can't have the same density as you would. You could actually do a mobile home park in a rural area on larger, on a large piece of property, just fewer units.
Yeah.
And so it's all based on the general plan density. So really anywhere where we have residential land use designation, a mobile home park, is a possibility.
All right. Now, the other thing that you've been busy with is community plans. So
No, we really haven't been that busy recently with them. We did include some of the community planning element. We have a community plan element within the general plan, and we looked at some of the communities that had developed some community plan documents early on in the general plan update process. There are two that are really standing out that have some, a lot of community backing. But we knew that there was going to be some controversy, and the board made the policy decision back in 15 or 16, to not proceed with community plans at that time, but incorporate them into the new general plan once that's adopted.
Right.
So most of District 2 and San Andreas, as well as Rancho Calaveras, community plan policies are incorporated into the new general plan. We'll be working on Valley Springs and Copperopolis. At least I'll be proposing to the board as soon as the plan's adopted, and I can go back to the board with an implementation program. That those are two of the highest priorities, is to work on Valley Springs and Copperopolis. The Highway 4 corridor, also, the communities of Douglas Flat and Murphys and Arnold, also have some outdated community plans that will be rescinded with the adoption of the general plan.
Okay.
And we'd like to work on those in the future, but they won't be immediate. We'd like to focus on Valley Springs and Copperopolis first, because they've been waiting.
Would the community plan be so much different than a general plan?
Well, it's just a little more focused. And so what we've done, the old general plan actually has sort of separate planning documents for the various communities.
Oh, okay.
And so there's just sort of like a hole in the general plan map. What we've done instead is include all of the land use designations in the county-wide plan.
Right.
Many of the policies that were included in previous community plans and some of the draft plans were incorporated as well. If it makes sense in Murphy's, it makes sense in Mokelumne Hill. So let's just incorporate as a county-wide policy.
That makes sense.
So there's a narrowly focused set of policies that just apply to an individual community like Mountain Ranch or West Point, and we'd like to do that. Now, there may be some modifications made to the land use map or some things, but it needs to be consistent with the overall general plan. So really just sort of a more focused look at that specific community and what's unique about that, and what are some of the policies that apply just to that community is what we'd be looking at.
I'm thinking about Moke Hill and Murphy's are both seem to be tourist oriented, and maybe the community plan would be focusing on that.
Well, right, and that's what we look at, sort of the unique difference, and what's interesting about both Mokelumne Hill and Murphy's is that the main streets of those two towns aren't the state highway, and so they're uniquely situated to accommodate more of an historic downtown walkable community, where San Andreas has the state highway going right through the middle of it here, and it makes it more difficult to really sort of focus that. So there's a unique challenge. We've also done some other circulation planning. We just did one in Murphy's along the Highway 4 and the Highway 49 corridor. One was adopted here a couple years ago in San Andreas, and we're working on one in Valley Springs to sort of look at that intersection of the state highway requirements. The state controls what happens on their highway, and how that interacts with the community. How can we make our communities more community focused, rather than getting vehicles through town as quickly as possible.
Right.
And we want to make sure it's safe, but can we slow down traffic a little bit? Can we provide better pedestrian and bicycle access, particularly safe access to schools? So more of a focused transportation and circulation planning effort that we've been going through.
Pretty hard to bypass San Andreas.
It's pretty hard to bypass it, yes.
But bypassing Murphy's worked very well. The next item is cannabis. That's been a big thing in the item, and Tuesday we ended the ban and then passed a regulatory ordinance for certain people only.
Yes.
Is that correct?
So the ordinance was adopted on Tuesday. It goes into effect in 30 days, which would be November 21st. But there's a provision that says we're not going to accept any applications until the fee is in place, which takes 60 days to become effective. So it would be December 21st would be the earliest that we would accept an application. Yes, it is limited. It's limited to those who were previously registered and in good standing. They hadn't been denied. Even though we didn't get through the processing of all of them, those that hadn't been denied or withdrew their application would be eligible. And if they had also received or had applied for a state license, and if they'd only applied, they hadn't got denied, except for when the ban went into effect, and then all state licenses were revoked or the applications were denied. Right. So if you meet the two criteria, you can meet all of the existing standards, then you have the right to apply. The board also said you have the right to essentially sell that right to apply. So you could transfer that to someone else. So if one grower said, oh, I'm not going to deal with it, but I was in good standing and I had a state license, that person could transfer that to someone else.
I see. So there'll be a marketplace there. I'm thinking if there's not enough applicants for these slots, was it 150, 190?
About 190.
190. If there's not enough, when you have a market, you're not restricting the market. But if there's more than 190, then we have a different situation. They'll be denied a permit.
Well, they wouldn't have the right to apply. So we'll have to figure out a tracking mechanism to say, okay, if grower A transferred that right to someone else who wasn't growing before, to make sure that that person then has been sort of marked off as, okay, that application has been used up by this person over here.
Okay.
And so we'll have to be tracking that to make sure. And there's also no limitation on the number of licenses that someone can apply for. So if a certain grower decided they were going to buy up the right to apply, they could have multiple cultivation sites, multiple permits under the county's program. Now, there are some restrictions at the state level as far as the number of permits that can be, the number of licenses that they can have. So county permits, state licenses, you need to have both. The other thing that I want to make sure that everyone's very aware of is no plants go in the ground until you're all approved. It's not like the urgency ordinance where you could grow first and then apply. You have to apply, get approved, get the state license, get validated, then you get to start your business, just like any other type of county permit. You don't get to start building before you get your building permit issued.
Okay, I understand. Well, I guess the main thing is if we're not restricting the marketplace, then the black market should start to disappear because there'd be no need for it.
Well, theoretically, that's the case, and that's I think the point. The board majority that voted for the ordinance felt that by allowing a regulatory program, that it would provide opportunity to go after some of the illegal growers that are certainly in the county now.
Yeah, it'll lessen the black market.
Yeah.
And I think we've already discussed a little bit about reforming some of our laws, reforming CEQA. And we talked about the economy, the connection of the economy to building and the cost of housing, and probably also jobs in the workplace would be involved as well. You seem like you're right in the middle of the most important, exciting things happening in this county.
Well, it's been an interesting, I've been here for 5.5 years now, and it's never been a dull moment. So, yeah, there's been a lot going on.
Well, I tell you, Peter, it's been a pleasure having you as a guest, and we look forward to you coming again. And thank you very much.
You're welcome. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you for watching Taxpayer Alert.